Right. Okay. I was wrong about that. There's the lore video on that mini-episode, and after that it'll be Dante's notes. It's 984-11. Mephistopheles was driving through the back streets of District 20, heading towards the nest of that part of the city. Rodia believing that the traffic sucks no matter which nest they went to, showing her clear boredom of this. Dante noted that they've been travelling at a snail's pace through the extreme congestion of the nest, or rather, the part of the back streets that's close to the nest, for several days. The effect of Rodia's boredom was clear. Ooh, this sounds worse than London now. Actually, no. It sounds more like Central African city levels of congestion, and they don't make drivers pay for the privilege of driving in those congested roads. Likely because in District 20, there are more exploitative practices in play. This was clearly sometime after the distortion incident in the back streets in District 20, which was 984-10. Yes, this involved the Kurokumo clan and the Blade lineage. This wasn't the first time they've been through periods of inactivity, but boredom wasn't something that they could easily get used to. Dante understood that it was part of their job to listen to the complaints about the slow pace of travel. Oh no, you've gone native, haven't you? Considering what District 20 is patterned on. Then Dante asked Faust how much longer until they reached the immigration checkpoints, asking this as they at least deserve to know how far they are from where they're going. Faust then mentioned that they'll be on standby for approximately a day at their next stop. They'll also be taking other stops before that. Well, Charon needs to rest. Their estimated time of arrival is in 3 days. Rodia did not react well to that, as it might as well be 3 months with how bored she was. Oh, seriously, was Tetris lost in this grimdark future? Gregor was angered by this. They're not travelling far, but the awful traffic is making it seem farther than it actually is. Dante agreed with Gregor. The city didn't seem that big. Although it might have something to do with the inevitably long travel times. They've yet to understand this. Ishmael understood that driving around in a large bus through the narrow back streets was what took them a long time to get anywhere. Otis believed that it would have been faster to march on foot. Yisang asked her where would they sleep and eat. Otis was asking with some annoyance if he was aware that camping out in the open was a natural part of any long march. Gregor then asked Officer Urtis if she's aware that not everyone here has been a soldier. Well, you certainly have, Gregor, although not by choice. And based on Urtis's Zayn EGO image, she also likely fought in the Smoke War. Just under different circumstances. Yisang was a researcher. Faust, her backstory is unclear. Don Quixote is a lunatic. Ryushu is a blood knight and possibly ex-Shi Association. Masson used to work for Encore. Honglu wasn't really doing much of anything due to his privileged upbringing. Heathcliff was a former thug. Ishmael was an office drone turned whaler. Rodia was a communist in all but name. Sinclair was another that was well off, until his family was murdered. Speaking of which, Sinclair reminded them that if they're unfortunate, they might run into the sweepers before the break of dawn. Ah yes, the instrument of terror in the backstreets that's also population control. Likely made by the head as a method of keeping the population in check. Not just physically, but psychologically. Sinclair reflected that terror as even a partial mention of them. The others know enough to not mess with them. They appeared before the break of dawn. They sweep up the trash in the backstreets between 3:13 AM and 4:34 AM. Yes, 3:13 AM and 4:34 AM is known as the night of the the night in the backstreets. They're urban nightmares, so the damned dozen will be at least capable of taking them on in small groups, but the main problem here is the numbers. They're seemingly endless, and they'd eventually be overwhelmed. Certainly unlikely to last the full 1 hour and 21 minutes. That and the sweepers have a broad definition of what trash is, which can include still living human bodies, as in those unfortunate enough to be trapped outside. Unless of course they're children, in that case they'll be taken alive to be converted into fresh sweepers. According to Faust, Mephistopheles is one of the few vehicles recognized by the city as a residential vehicle, so the sweepers will leave them alone, likely as long as they keep the doors shut when they appear. She warned that attempting to sleep outside in the backstreets would make sleep less than restful, as they'd need to survive the onslaught of sweepers during the time they were out. Rodia saw this as making sense as they avoid the residential areas. In fact, there's a taboo that would result in taboo hunters from anywhere to hunt them down, and possibly fixes if those areas were damaged. Yes, that made it harder to evade the sweepers when Moses, Ezra, and Vesper Crabrow were caught outside during their journey through District 12. Rutius saw the dilemma: a slow yet safe travel by vehicle or a fast yet high-risk march on foot. Yisang didn't see the latter option as up for consideration. The commotion was silenced when Virgilius appeared from the creaking of the opened back door. Tired of all this going on, barely tolerating this band of emotional retards. At the best of times. Never mind now. He understood that they're all quite impatient, but they're precisely on schedule, telling them to save their breaths and stop complaining. He would have been worried about a mutiny if he didn't know better. Ishmael then got to the point and asked if the papers in his hand were new orders from the higher-ups. Yes, Dante also observed the freshly printed paper in his hands. It was then revealed that this wasn't the first time this happened, and that in his room, Virgilius received communications from the higher-ups and was doing this to update them as well. Virgilius confirmed this. This irritated Heathcliff, concerned that this was another detour. He was quite done with cleaning up distorted messes. They have to get to... Then Virgilius made it clear that he was going to put up with this even less than he usually would, and told him to stop whining like a petulant child. there wouldn't be any more detours until they reached their destination. He then leaned against one of the first-row chairs and then leisurely shuffled through the documents. Apparently, this is just an announcement that there will be changes to how records of abnormalities, distortions, and peccatula are categorized. This annoyed Roger, asking if they have to do a bunch of paperwork. Faust said no. Once completed, observation logs are all digitized and shared with the higher-ups, although they might need editing. There might be orders to adjust them by hand. This is to say that categorization of each will be updated automatically, and this is just informing them of the upcoming changes. Virgilius found it a relief that someone else was explaining this once, confirming this. Yi Sang presumed that this had something to do with the evolutions of the peccatula that was encountered earlier. According to Virgilius, that was only part of it. He then called Yi Sang and Ishmael. Ishmael didn't sound all that bothered, and Yi Sang was more attentive. Virgilius would leave it in the hands of those two model students to explain the contents of the documents that he doesn't feel like he's up to the task of explaining what's on the paper to all of them, laughing briefly. Now he's just taking the... Well, he needs some amusement in this job. Could be worse. He could have been stuck with Roland the Black Stain. Then he shoved the papers in Ishmael's hands, and then took his seat in the front row. Ishmael asked if he just dumped his responsibility onto them. Well, the damned dozen dumps their insanity onto him, so you're even. Dante observed that she wasn't too happy about this, yet she opened the documents and began reading. Roger couldn't tell if he actually doesn't care about them, or he's just naturally one that comes off as a cool person. Well, he cared about the children in the orphanage because he wanted to make sure that they were at least away from a life of crime. They were also orphans because he killed their parents, who were members of an organized crime syndicate. Then Tomeri and Iori destroyed that orphanage. Yes, the Ori, the Purple Tear. Then the surviving orphans were abducted by the Ring for experimentation using the glass window technology, which NCorp had an interest in. In that time, his office was wiped out by taboo hunters. Due to the footage that was recorded that led them to that lab, being recorded in District 14. And during this, he manifested EGO after a conversation with Carmen. Lapis became Charon, and Garnet... I'm not sure what happened to him. Well, Virgilius was in Limbus company because he wanted to restore what still remained. Of course, Rodia doesn't know that, as he doesn't make many things clear, except in times of strong annoyance. You definitely understand when he's feeling that, when his eyes were glowing red. Anyway, Rodia asked Ishi what it said. Ishmael read this, sitting there asking if there was anything new about the abnormalities. Ishmael found out that this document was from LCD, the distortion team, at least according to the sender address. This excited Don Quixote, as that was the department that contacted Dante, who remembered Ezra's chaotic, bubbly voice coming through the radio. Ishmael also read something about the former L-Corp. Yes, the Botany Corporation. And Ryushu said, BAH. Bother and hassle? Dante saw this as getting out of hand. Yi Sang said that if they would allow him to, Ishmael was starting to look almost deranged by the chaos of this situation, starting to understand how Virgilius was feeling, telling them that this was exactly why she's the only one who ever reads the guides. This was concerning to Dante. Concerning that she would drop the document and instead grab her mace and pummel those that annoyed her. So Dante decided to step in at that point, telling Ishmael to calm down, nearly tearing the documents in half with how tightly she was gripping them. She quickly loosened her grip. They ordered Ryushu and Otis to keep Don Quixote and Heathcliff quiet while they take care of this. Ryushu seeing this as fun, until Dante added that she was to do this without killing them or beating them up. This killed her mood. She said BAH. She lowered Don Quixote's lance that she picked up, likely intending to insert it in her. Dante then told them that if they have any questions while Ishmael reads from the documents, raise their hands, unless they're Yi Sang or Faust, as they know that they won't speak unless it's necessary. In this case, if there are any details to elaborate on, Faust understood, as did Yi Sang. Dante then told Roger that if anyone speaks out of turn, to smack them lightly in the head. And if she does well with this, she'll have extra desserts during their team dinner. This certainly motivated Rodia, due to her thinking with her stomach. Otis complimented their improving leadership, sucking up to them as usual. Roger then decided to deliver the first bonk to Otis. Before Otis could stop her, she received that. A few minutes after that, order was restored. The situation settled enough to return the documents to Ishmael, who explained that Lobotomy Corporation used to contain and manage the abnormalities that they faced in the branch facilities, even taking into account that their strengths were suppressed by the golden bars. There was a significant difference between their risk level categorizations and the actual risk involved in facing them. Other employees and the higher-ups of Limbus Company also apparently felt that something was familiar yet off. It's why they investigated this through the LCD department. So far, there have been 5 categories of risk levels. Then, Heathcliff asked if there was only 4 of them. Roger then delivered a bonk to the head. This made him slump to the ground, knocking him out cold. Clearly, he didn't see this coming. Dante was worried that she killed them. Or rather, killed him, understanding that they might need to revive him. Knowing the pain that they'd feel. Thankfully, Roger denied that. He'd be fine. She didn't smack him that hard. Sinclair quietly raised his hand at that point, and Ishmael let him speak. He asked the same question as Heathcliff. He thought that there was only 4 risk levels: Zayn, Tef, He, and Wa. Ishmael added that they're the ones that you've encountered so far, but Aleph is the highest risk level. Ooh, that's a rare one, and thankfully they've not been encountered yet. I doubt that the damned dozen are ready for them. She's seeing a pretty significant disparity between their categorization methods and their experience of them in the field, which is why they were overhauling them to Limbus company standards. She then told Masol, who raised his hand, to go ahead. He wanted to know what exactly this overhaul entails. Does it mean that they'll be recategorizing all the abnormalities within the existing framework, or will additional risk-level categories be created? Ishmael told him that sadly it doesn't elaborate that far, but the Lobotomy Corporation used each abnormality's enkephalin production capability to categorize them into different risk levels. The more complicated they are to manage, the more enkephalin they produced. The more complicated they were, the harder they are to fight. There are some parts of that which line up with their own experiences, but it's not flawless. They're trying to make the risk levels better reflect their own field experiences. They might add more tiers to the pre-existing ones. Yisang understood this as the difference between management and combat, so the standards need adjusting in accordance to... Then, just as Roger was about to smack Yisang's head, Dante stopped her from doing so, reminding her that Yisang can speak without raising his hand. Roger realized this mistake and stopped. It was almost like she did it out of pure instinct. Ishmael then continued, saying that it's why they're overhauling the risk levels based on actual risk each abnormality poses in battle, which will be reflected in the risk levels written in the observation logs, informing them of the precise details when they've decided. Then she told them that the next section was about distortions, which Don Quixote raised her hand, but Ishmael chose to ignore her, believing that what she had to say wasn't anything relevant to what they were discussing. So far, they've been using the same subject classification codes as abnormalities for the distortions. But there is a clear difference between them. They will be given distinct classification codes. Honglu raised his hand, making Don Quixote crestfallen. Honglu understanding that abnormalities transform into egg-like forms when defeated. Distortions don't. Faust confirmed this. Distortions can be killed, but slaying abnormalities, even theoretically, a way hasn't yet been found. Ishmael then said that they have first-hand experience against them, so it shouldn't be too hard to understand. Then she came to the last subject. The Pekatula. Yes, they're having their own classification code scheme as well, including what they've recently encountered while taking care of Bamboo-Hatted Kim. Then she didn't get what she was reading. The Pekatula lacked the uniqueness of the abnormalities and distortions. Then Faust walked up to her and began to explain this. No same entity exhibits the same location. Pekatulum are multiples of the same category in each encounter. The same can't be said for abnormalities or distortions. Then Heathcliff, having regained consciousness, understood this to mean that Pekatula are all in the same bin, but each abnormality and distortion is unique, criticizing their lack of ease when explaining it. Then Rodia smacked him on the head again, knocking him unconscious again. Rodia was looking forward to the extra desserts. Ishmael then concluded what she was explaining. Seeing it as pretty great and refreshing for them to do something like that. Don Quixote hadn't lowered her hand since then, not even for a moment. Ishmael, not expecting much from this, let her ask away. Don Quixote asking if she knows of the name of the LCD employee who wrote that report. Now this surprised Ishmael, as this was a sensible question, even though it had the same enthusiasm that she was using when speaking about fixes. The The sender was LCD on-site investigative reasoning team leader Moses. Oh yes, that one. She'll keep the name in mind, as they'll probably run into them sooner or later, apologising for ignoring Don Quixote. Mildly annoying Don Quixote, as this showed that Ishmael was deliberately ignoring her. She was also thinking deeply about this. Dante asked if there was anything wrong. Don Quixote recalled hearing that name in the past, but she couldn't quite recall who that name belonged to. She might not remember that, but those who have been keeping up with the law do. Moses is the distortion detective, someone affiliated with Seven Association, who has been dealing with distortions for longer than Limbus Company have done. Why does she have some memory of Moses? Okay, either this is a lapse in her memory, as she'd likely know a fixer of notes like her, or it might be connected to her past. So far, we know almost nothing, so her past might as well be multiple choice. Ishmael then was relieved that they're finally done. Rodia was disappointed, as she thought she could collect more desserts. Faust noted that it was more time consuming than expected. Dante then announced a day's close of business for them, noting that they were pretty cooperative and they managed to finish early. They followed the others, feeling lighter than at the start of the day. Then they felt like they were forgetting something. It took them 30 minutes to realise that they left Heathcliff out cold on the bus floor. While I admit that Rodia was being unintentionally disproportionate, this is probably going to be the least of Heathcliff's problems that's about to happen, considering that Chapter 6 will be starting with Don't Go Breaking My Heart by Elton John and Keith D being the song that fits the theme of what he's about to deal with. It'll likely end badly, where best case scenario, the song that will fit this situation will be You Give Love a Bad Name by Bon Jovi, and I can think of one worst case scenario. It'll be Heart Demolition by Dragon Force. That'll be a song that's best fitting of the situation. Yes. As in, what has caused many a strained wrist with the game Beat Saber, especially with the Beat Saber themed song Power of the Saber Blade. Right, now that we've got that out of the way, let's move on to Dante's notes, see what they have to say about what has been. Well, until next time, hail the rabbit!